Hello, hello, hello. My second live of the day. I think I caught a bit of sun since I was last on here live. That's what happens when you live in Mallorca. It is hot, and I'm very grateful for that. But anyway, that's not why I am coming into this live. As you might have seen of late, I am doing a live every Tuesday with a new theme for the week. And of course, it's all related to good girls, good girl conditioning. And there are many roots, but one of the roots, which I'm also now going to be talking about today, is codependency. And in fact, I want to look at the relationship between self-esteem, codependency, and self-care. And I suppose, some of you might have heard of codependency. It's a psychological term around unhealthy relationship dynamics. So this is where one person's sense of purpose or worth is entirely contingent or relying on another person. And so the other person and their needs, their thoughts, their behaviors, their wants, their approval, their preferences. And this, of course, sounds very much like a good girl, as that's also what good girls do. And another thing that us good girls do is, with this constant outward focus, we tend to also then take care of other people. We want to, or we think we want to take care of other people. At the core of that, of course, is that makes us feel safe, that makes us feel loved, and that there is belonging, and then there is connection. But what we often do is we give from an empty cup. And I very often use the analogy of when I'm sure many of you have been on an airplane, where at the beginning, before we take off, they talk about the mask for oxygen. And of course, they always say, first, put your oxygen mask on yourself, and then anyone that you're caring for. For good girls, of course, that's not always so obvious that that's what you have to do first. You cannot give off an empty cup. And this is also where self-care comes into the picture, because when we truly care for ourselves, it then and only then becomes possible that we care for others. And then we can really care far more profoundly for others when we give from a full cup, certainly not from an empty cup. So when we truly care for ourselves, only then can we really be in a position to start giving and caring for others. But this putting ourselves first and taking care of ourselves, we were not taught this as children. We were not even guided to see ourselves as equal as others often. And remember, I often talk from the perspective of the children that experience difficulties to a point where we are compensating, right? So there might be some people that this content does not speak to you because you did not grow up in a family where you were mistreated in some way, or where you experienced any struggles in any way. Often it wasn't really acceptable to ask for what we needed or wanted. Certainly not okay to say, no, I prefer this and not that. and this is not a dig at any parents. I might have to just say this as a the small print of every video that I do, because as many of you will be aware of, pain travels throughout families. So if you were neglected as a child in any way, shape, or form, most likely your caretakers were doing the best they could, as their caretakers were. And yet, that was not enough. So many of us, we didn't get the memo that self-care, self-worth, really sensing what's important for us. We didn't get that memo that was important. Many of us, as we were growing up, we learned that giving was the only thing that we could do. Give till it hurts was perhaps more of a common lesson. And in those situations, of course, overgiving is encouraged. Burdening ourselves is encouraged. So as a child or young adult, for many of us, it seemed like selfishness was a terrible offense. That message was clear: don't be selfish, or even don't appear selfish. And if you look back and you ever got this message, that could really crush our self-esteem. And, I remember when I trained as a coach, which was 21 years ago, selfishness was a big part of the early stages of our training. And we learned that selfishness is a really good thing. And it took me quite a while to get my head around this concept. I was like, how can selfishness be a good thing? But I learned that, I learned I was already an adult. Now, asking for anything that we want or need can seem selfish. Speaking well of ourselves seems conceited. And was it a training I did, or was it just like a webinar I attended where a big thing was to brag? And I thought, isn't this wonderful? To really speak well about ourselves. And instead of people looking at you like, oh God, you're so conceited, or you're so full of yourself, instead it's like, brag away. Oh, I think it was through this wonderful teacher called Mama Gina. She does like a brag fest. Anyway, when we lose this sense of, or when we learn that selfishness is not good and putting ourselves first is not good, it does impact our self-esteem. And then this lack of self-esteem can leave us vulnerable to exploitation, both when we're younger as well as when we're adults. Because without asserting our needs, we neglected them because we prioritize others. We prioritize other people's needs. And this then led to depending on satisfying other people to feel worthy, right? So then we go outside and we sense, we're so highly attuned to our parents, family members, looking to see, what can I do so that I can feel worthy? And this vicious codependent cycle begins, and it really leaves us depleted. So again, codependence is this unhealthy relationship dynamic where one person, so let's say me, my sense of purpose, of self-worth, of meaning in this life is entirely reliant on another person, right? Their needs, their thoughts, what they want. So this might sound familiar to you or not, but it's worth having a little bit of a inquiry around this, because in this world where there's so much competition for for your time, for your attention. And it's very easy, you go on social media and you see all these perfect people, and that can be an even bigger hit to your self-worth. But actually, have you ever considered celebrating your strengths, your talents, your skills, your wins? Because it's not conceited to acknowledge what's positive in you, what's worthy of acknowledgement, of celebration. Because you might think that you're avoiding claiming some sort of a superiority over others. But remember, self-care and being cared for are essential. And part of self-care is to really recognize that you deserve to give yourself the best. So let's reflect a little bit on self-esteem, self-care, and codependency. So high self-esteem promotes resilience against challenges. And let's face it, we have and are still facing many challenges every day. Then low self-esteem and questioning our own worth can lead to codependency. And it's this vicious cycle. Now, self-care is intentionally caring for our health so that we feel worthy and esteemed. But often, like people might think that, what is self-care? And it might be like, getting a massage or a pedicure or something. It actually involves activities and practices based on your needs, your interests in life. And it's not treating ourselves when we're sad or splurging when we shouldn't. It's really practicing having our own needs met, looking at what our preferences are and making sure they are present in our life. Like, for example, after this call, I'm going dancing, I'm going ecstatic dancing. Now, it would be very easy to just sit here and look at my beautiful view and continue working on my computer. But for me, dancing is actually self-care. For you, it might be going to the gym or making sure you're in nature X amount of times per week. Self-care might be that you sit and you focus on your breath for 20 minutes. So actual self-care can look so different in many different ways. Like I said, it could be going to the gym, any kind of exercise, what you put in your mouth, your diet, and diet is a bit of a tricky word, but just like what you put in your mouth, how much sleep you get. And I realized that it doesn't matter how late I go to bed, I still wake up early. So for me, it's actually imperative that I get to bed early. Otherwise, I just don't get that rest that I need. Emotional self-care can be journaling, which I'm always recommending in my newsletters. There's very often journaling practices, but also to my clients, my one-on-one clients, in groups, they go and get therapy or counseling. Mindfulness, like I said, just focusing on your breath. Any hobbies you might have. Like we now have a beautiful horse that lives on a field next to us, and I'm so in love. And I don't know how to ride yet. It's been so long. So that's one thing that I'd like to develop. First of all, finding ways to develop, learning to, get to know horses a little bit more. And then I'd like to have a hobby to ride. Now, social care, self-care can mean spending time with loved ones, which I will also do today. But it's also about setting boundaries, something that we, good girls at least, have a hard time with. But I have to say, as over 20 years as a coach and many years as a counselor, I've never had a client that has really solid personal boundaries, good, healthy, solid boundaries. Then there's intellectual self-care. I listen to a lot of podcasts, could be reading, learning in some way, pursuing your interests. And spiritual Self-care can look like prayer, meditation, like I said earlier, nature, or taking steps towards fulfilling your purpose, if that's something that is special for you. Of course, self-care is essential for managing stress, or essential for getting some balance. And it's not selfish. When we truly care for ourselves, it then becomes, like I said, possible to care far more profoundly for other people that are important to us. Now, codependence, on the other hand, is we come last, and instead we're constantly looking outwards. And as you can imagine, then it can mean that we don't take care of ourselves. So perhaps we have poor health, poor fitness, when we're engaging in false validation because we're always looking outside. We rely on others' approval for our identity or for feeling good about ourselves. So how does self-esteem and codependency connect? Well, validation seeking makes us insecure, and that could lead us to please others. Fear of rejection, which is another big one in codependency and good girls, could keep us in harmful situations. Or we go too far, or we don't step away when we know we really should. And lack of boundaries causes enabling behaviors. You know, when you don't put your boundaries up, that can cause all sorts of hurt and abuse on yourself. And when we're self-neglecting, we're prioritizing others over our own needs. So throughout this week, I'm going to be posting resources. I'll also be posting some journaling prompts so that you can explore this topic a little bit more. But improving self-esteem really involves accepting our strengths, also our weaknesses, where you're not as strong. And also that will help us be our best selves. Setting boundaries demonstrates self-respect. Wellness activities enhances self-care. So like I said earlier, if counseling or therapy provides guidance and can really help you to really start digging into what's really true for you and not what you think is true because you learned to think about others before yourself. And so by understanding these concepts, you can really start breaking harmful patterns and move towards health, happiness, and certainly moving away from this prison that is codependence. So I'd love to hear what you found valuable in today's live. And like I said, I'll be posting lots this week. If you're interested in joining my newsletter, that information is also here in the group. I send a newsletter once a week only. So you're not going to be bombarded by emails, but it's a great way to stay connected also. So from my heart to yours, wishing you a beautiful rest of your week. Bye for now.